in that binder, you should have a couple of compartments. It's a place to keep everything in front of you. You should have hole punches. And so those go inside the binder at the end of the day. It's also a place to write notes. And then there's a feedback form that's not hole punched, and that I would like back at the end here. Also inside your binder is a piece of some plastic hangers there that have different places for cards. Those are for any of the panelists' business cards that you want to maybe reach out to later and have a more in-depth conversation about your own situation, or if you know a friend or a family member that can benefit from a conversation with our panelists today, that's what those are for. So a little bit of housekeeping. The restrooms are right across the hall here. Also, if everybody can silence their cell phones, just take a moment and silence your cell phones for us. If you do need to take a call, I know when doctors call, you need to take those right away. So if you need to make a phone call, just go ahead and step outside the room, make those phone calls, take those phone calls, and then step back in. A little bit, today we're gonna do things just a little differently than we have in the past. So I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes here, and then we have some great panelists that are going to come up and talk to you about conversations to have with your loved ones and adult children. And then I'm going to open it up to see if there's some role playing. So if there's a conversation that you wanted to have, that you don't know how to start, you can have us role play it out. You can be part of the role play, you can play yourself, you can play the person you don't want to have a conversation with and see what their reaction is, right? Or our panelists have graciously agreed to play both parts with a little bit of background information. So think about that during our talk today, and we'd be glad to do that. As always, I want to thank our education partners for being here. We are a little bit more of an intimate group today because the Caregiver Wellness Day is today, so a lot of our regulars are over in Iowa City going through that. For people who are caregivers every day, and so I have to give it to Heritage, because Heritage puts us on every year to celebrate our caregivers and to give them a day of pampering and education. So thank you, Kelly. We should give them a hand. And I want to thank all the other education partners, because without them, we couldn't do this every month. They are here to help me along the way. They're a resource for everyone. And honestly, to pay for this and pay for the marketing, I couldn't do it. And because of their support, we're going to continue through 2026. So we've committed to at least 10 to 12 months of series in 2026. So thank you. So what you're here today to talk about is how to have those conversations, right? From my perspective, working in real estate, I mainly, work with my clients individually. Most of them make all their own decisions, and they have family in the background, and they talk to their family about those decisions. And most of our conversations revolve around where they're going to move, what they want their lifestyle to look like as they downsize. But sometimes they're no longer able to make their decisions, or they need some input from their family members. And so the family gets a little more involved. And that really changes the dynamic of the entire process. And so that's why we're having this conversation today, is how to have those conversations ahead of time. So I'll be talking to you a little bit from that perspective, and then our panelists will come up and talk to you about the perspective of what happens later in life when those conversations aren't had. And emergencies come up, and hospitalizations come up, and other people are making those decisions that don't know what your needs are and your wants are. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to start out, as I always do, with some truths. So we talked about this last month, right? The first one, your adult children are having conversations about you. Some of us think, oh, are they talking about us or not? And I'm here to tell you they are. They're all talking about you. As an adult child, they're all having conversations. And, it's the elephant in the room. So the sooner you can initiate your conversations, the better for you, right? Number 2, adult children of aging parents are having conflicting goals related to their roles as caregivers. This is so true. You probably went through this with your parents, right? You probably had children when you were helping your parents as well, and that has a conflicting goals, right? You're trying to care for your family and also take care of your parents. And I would say it's even more true in our society of longevity right now, because you have people like me who start their family in their 40s. You have people in their 40s that have have that variety, that bigger quantity. And so that really affects us trying to care for our parents. My father, I think I've told you guys, my father had a long illness, kind of a dementia adjacent illness. And we took care of him from out of state. We had people in place. He lived in a really rural area, and which was fine. My sister and I would fly in whenever he had an episode. We'd take care of it. We'd get him to the hospital. We'd get him the vitamins, the nutrients he needed to get it back on track. And it was usually, sometimes it'd be 6 months to a year in between these episodes, and he'd be fine. And we would visit him every couple of months and, you know, do meal plans and that kind of stuff. But then, as I said, I had a child at 40, and my life changed. And I'll never forget one day, my dad got sick, and so I thought, I need to stay home. My daughter was under 6 months. I stayed home, and I remember it was like, sorry, a little emotional, but it was in the middle of the night, I was feeding her, and the hospital called me, and they said, your dad's had a stroke, and he needs treatment. And I'm used to being on the other side of that. I'm used to being the emergency medicine person. I worked for 17 years in emergency medicine. And I'm very calm, and I have it together when that stuff happens, and I was not. Because here I was, my infant daughter in my hands, feeling guilt over not leaving her with my dad, guilt over, you know, going to see my dad. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to avoid, have these conversations. Aging creates conflicting goals for individuals, for you, right? You probably have conflicting goals. You want autonomy and control, and maybe there'll come a time where you need some help, but you think, oh gosh, do I ask for help? If I ask my children to help me, are they gonna take over everything? Are they going to just help me with the things I ask them for? So the conflicting goals for you as well. And this last one, I want everyone to take a minute, and any part in life, I think everybody needs to think about this. Effective communication is the responsibility of the communicator. And whether you're 10 or 80, effective communication is the responsibility of the communicator. I think that's so important. So, communication styles. You know, we think when we communicate clearly and openly that it's heard and received, and everybody communicates differently. Everybody perceives the communication differently based on our lives and what we've gone through. So really only 7% of your communication is impacted by what you say, by your words. 7%, a small number. 55% is how you appear. So are you sitting back in your chair when you're having these conversations? Are your arms crossed? Are you leaning forward and being open and honest? Also, 38% is from how we sound. You know, just being open with our voice and our emotion behind it. And being vulnerable. I grew up in my dad's favorite thing to say was suck it up. So I grew up in a household where you just push through things. You know, I mean, we were country, we were on a farm, and that's just what you did. And that's just a generational thing probably. So I think learning to be vulnerable is important. And a lot of us were raised like that, where we weren't vulnerable with our emotions and how we feel. And I think that we could benefit. I'm learning from it in my 40s, how to benefit from it. And I'll tell you, my relationships are deeper and just so much more in depth than when I've learned to do that. The lack of intentional and direct communication results in assumptions and miscommunications. So not having conversations, not being direct in your communication, and using closed loop communication, meaning you have them repeat it back to you so that you can hear it in their words and know how, you know, that they're hearing what you're trying to say to relate to them. So these are the types of children I've run into in my practice here in real estate. Like I said, most of my clients I just talk to the client facing, but sometimes their families are involved. And so these are kind of the categories of families I've run into. So there's the uninvolved family. This is a lot of them. You know, they're there in the background, but really you're making all your own decisions. And you may talk to them behind the scenes, but you're making all of your own decisions. And you may be asking for their input, but I don't know anything about it as a client. Supportive and available if needed. These are the kids and the loved ones that are available to help you if you ask them. But, you know, you're pretty self-sufficient, so you may not need them, but they say, hey, let me know what I can do, I'll be there for you. Then there's the supportive and actively involved. These are the boots on the ground family members. These are the ones that are helping you make decisions, going on tours with you, talking through everything. They're really boots on the ground. Oops, sorry about that. Then there's the controlling and unavailable. And so you might say, how can someone be controlling and unavailable? But they can't be. These are typically kids with high-power jobs. They live out of state, away from you usually, but they still want control. So these, when I have these type of family members, usually even if I'm talking to my client in person, I know that I'm not really talking to the decision maker, right? I'm having a conversation, but I know that that person is going to go back to the controlling one, and that person's going to make the ultimate decision, and then they'll come back to me. So, is there any guesses what type, what person this would be, like what gender and what profession? Anybody want? Christine?
Male attorneys.
Male attorneys. That's exactly who it is. Male attorneys, and I would love for someone to have a male attorney son that doesn't fit this role. I would love to have that outlier. But I mean, that's just part of it. That's what they do for a career, right? They're really busy, and that's just they still want to be part of it, but they can't do their practice. So then we have the controlling and actively involved. So these are the ones that are here and present. They're here with you, but they're still just as controlling, but they're part of the process minute by minute. So any idea who these are?
Female social worker.
Well, close. It's the adult daughter. It's me. So it's the adult daughter, and you know, they usually have a job where it's a high-powered job. They may be a CEO. They may be a CEO outside of their home. They may be a CEO in their home, right? They may run their household that way. And that's just, they get stuff done. Let me tell you, they do get stuff done. They are controlling, but everything is taken care of. The proxy decision maker by design. So these are the ones where you have, go ahead and put a power of attorney in place. And let's say something happens, we're in a crisis situation, whether that's temporary or a permanent crisis situation, they have to step forward and make those decisions for you. So that's a proxy with a power of attorney. And hopefully, you know, you have those in place, and hopefully you take what you learned today and have conversations with them. Because just because it's in place, if you haven't told them what you want or haven't written it down, they're still going to be floundering trying to make those decisions for you. And then there's the proxy decision makers by default. This is someone who's put in place to be your decision maker, whether you want them to be or not. This is a guardianship. It may be a family member, it may be someone that you've spoken to about your wants and needs, or maybe someone you haven't. And this is, again, the last two are just crisis situations that I've run into. This one's a tough one because they may not even know that they were going to be in charge. You may not have told them. And you didn't choose them, right? So they didn't know, and you didn't know they were gonna be in charge. But because of what has come to play, that is what's happened. So the hardest ones from my background that I've worked with has been the proxy by default, because nobody wins in that situation. Nobody's happy with the outcome usually because everyone's trying to make the right decision, and it's someone that may not know what you need. Also, the controlling and unavailable. And sometimes the controlling and actively involved, but I kind of like them because they're kind of a kindred spirit. But they have to, because they usually do have your best needs and have had conversations with you. So that's been my main experience. I think today what I'd like you to learn is to have the conversations ahead and to know these. Can anybody recognize their family member from these descriptions? Anybody kind of see? And can you recognize yourselves from here? Because I mean, it's important to know who we are as people when we have these conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our panelists to talk. And in your Kinsey defense, I will say this. You know, when kids come at you at an angle of control, a lot of it's because we feel out of control. Because we want to be caregivers and we want to be supportive, and we have other things pulling at us. So just talk to us. Let us know. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Sometimes I think the mic doesn't hear very well. So, welcome to our panelists. I appreciate you guys coming today. And I want to take a minute and just have you introduce yourselves, who you are, what company you're with, and also a little short bit about how you came into that role, what your background is. So, Caitlin, do you want to
I'm still
start?
working on all this.
Sure can. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I usually don't need the mic, I'm really loud. So my name's Caitlin. I am a social worker at Suncrest Hospice. I have been in the medical social work field for over a decade. I did about 9 years inpatient at a hospital. So I transitioned recently to end-of-life care, in part because of the difficulties with communication and choices that family members had to make during those emergent situations. I am the female social worker who is controlling and available, but I can also play different roles, and it kind of depends on my parents. So for my mom, I'm the supportive and available because she doesn't want me in her business, and I'm the proxy by appointment for both of my parents. So I play the role I need to depending on the day.
Like that. I like that you added what role you play. That's nice. All right, Kelly. Well, I'll just share a mic here.
I can share, I promise.
Two hard things.
Hello, I'm Kelly from the Heritage Area Agency on Aging. Heritage serves a 7-county area. We've been around for 50 years. So we work our mission is ultimately to link people up to the services and supports for the home setting of their choice so that they can live as independently and optimally as possible. So I'm proud to be at Heritage for 17 years now. Pardon me, 19 years. I just lost 2 years. 19 years. 19 years, and my role has changed a lot, but right now I oversee all of the in-care programs from all the way from, you know, when you call our office and get some information over the phone to elder abuse prevention and awareness to case management. And then I also oversee our non-nutrition subcontracts, so that's what I do. I worked in the field of aging from right when I graduated from college because I knew I didn't want to work with kids. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I have my own and I love them, but I didn't want to work with other people's children. So that's my role at Heritage.
Good morning, and thank you for being here today. My name is Rebecca Crawford, and I work with St. Croix Hospice. Been there for 5.5 years. I got into hospice about 15 years ago, and I have been the daughter of 2 parents now that have passed, and each experience with hospice is different, but I became a caregiver for my father at a young age of 20 and decided to go into nursing after he passed, so going on 30 years here as a nurse, but I absolutely love being able to help people know about the benefits of hospice. No matter what hospice they choose to go with, it is a benefit that Medicare covers, and every family is going to be affected at some point. It's not a matter of if someone is going to pass that we love, but it's a matter of when. So being here today and Carla helping us be able to give our messages to you today is super important. I am also in the middle of bringing my mother-in-law back into town to be closer with us, and I would see myself as the supportive and actively involved daughter-in-law that she says is a chosen position for me as a friend and more like a daughter. So we have a very close relationship, and that's very important to me. And not only my own relationship, but for my kids to see that we take care of each other. And you know, being an elder, you want to help and honor them. So thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you. So we're gonna start with the first question. What happens when older adults don't communicate their wishes with their loved ones? So Caitlin, I wanna start with you. You just told us that you left the hospital setting because of so much partly
Yes.
because of everything you've seen. So tell us a little bit more about what you saw when these conversations weren't had.
We saw a lot of difficulty and struggle within families and fights and arguments, and the piece that affected me the most was my patients not having their wishes met. And so a lot of times patients would come into the hospital because of a crisis, critical situation. I happened to be on cardiac stroke, so it was usually one or two things. And if they hadn't communicated what they wanted previously, we would end up with our patients having procedures that maybe they didn't want, prolonged care that they would not have chosen for themselves. We would have family members fighting about the care that would occur after the hospitalization because Medicare is only covering so many days in the hospital. And then we have our next steps, which is going to be our at-home care, our facility care, and an inpatient rehab. And so when those discussions weren't had, decisions had to be made quickly. People ended up in places they didn't want to be, and patients ended up unhappy. And so I, in part, switched gears to end-of-life care because everybody knows that's coming. But we can honor the way the patient would like that to occur. And so we had a lot of difficulties, especially when somebody would come in with an injury and need placement. They would end up in a nursing home when there are alternative options, but those discussions hadn't been had about what kind of help family could provide or what financially they could afford, and so they ended up in a nursing home, which is not where many people wanted to be.
Thank you for that input. Kelly, how about yourself? What happens when you don't have those communicate your wishes ahead of time with your loved ones? What have you seen?
Really, I think Caitlin's described it well as far as, the really bad things that can happen. But I think really it's one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your family and your children is to say what it is that you want and to take the legal steps to make sure that it happens, meaning get the power of attorney, get the durable power of attorney. Not everybody needs a will, okay? But if it is something that you need, meaning you have resources, get it in a will, because it is the best gift that you can give your family. For your family and for yourself, really. You're letting people know what it is that you want, and more importantly, what you don't want. And it really prevents a lot of conflict and unnecessary stress and fights, fights. I don't think anybody goes, boy, I can't wait to get sick and my children start fighting, right? There's nobody that wants that to happen. So it is a tremendous gift to give. And I would encourage you to really, really do it. It means there might be some awkward conversations, yes, and some hard conversations, but you've set your, these are the rules, okay? And then everybody can know going forward.
Very good advice. On a side note of that, just because you have children doesn't mean that your children have to be in charge of those decisions. There are other options. And not everybody wants their children in charge of those decisions. Some people choose to have a third party, and have those conversations with a third party. And there are legal routes you can go for that. So that's always another option. So Rebecca, question for you. We talked about these conversations, two parts. What is the ideal time to have the conversation? And B, who do you think should initiate that conversation?
Thank you, Carla. So the ideal time would be when it's on your mind a lot and when you maybe have heard about stories that have occurred and someone maybe did not want to be resuscitated and they were resuscitated at the end, and then the family still has to make the decision to stop those life-prolonging measures. So, it really does hit home when we're seeing it happen around us for our friends or family members. And maybe we never had those conversations with them if they're extended family, but then it starts being more personal. And so if you are children and you haven't had those conversations, yes, it will be awkward. It's nobody wants to really talk about the what ifs and, you know, think about their loved ones not being with them in their full capacity. But finding out in your own mind, what does quality of life look like to you? And if that is not being unable to do things for yourself, you know, would you want to have people coming into your home? Would you want your family members to take a leave from work and care for you? So those are very important questions. And like Caitlin said, it happens in the snap of a finger, the blink of an eye. And oftentimes, you know, depending on the situation and the diagnosis, we're not prepared sometimes to hear those words from the doctor that, you know, you're gonna not be able to do the things that you once enjoyed doing. So having that conversation earlier in life before a diagnosis is made is super important. And additionally, if there is dementia in the family, or if you know that you're maybe at high risk for that, having those conversations prior to developing symptoms is super important when you can still make those decisions for yourself. And then the second piece of that, Carla, was?
Who should initiate those conversations?
Yes, I feel like it is important for you to take the lead, because your family doesn't want to come up to you and say, oh my gosh, I know you're turning 85 next week, but you haven't told me what your wishes are. Kids don't usually want to have that conversation. So taking control and being able to keep that independence that you have when you can make those decisions for yourself is super important. So me at 52, I have had that conversation with one of my kids because he's open to that. My husband doesn't like to talk about it. The other two boys don't want to talk about it yet, but at least one of my kids kind of know my standpoint on what quality of life looks like for me. And you can kind of keep it light like that, you know, saying quality of life rather than, you know, what if I can't talk for myself? What if I can't do things for myself any longer? It's just, here's what's really important to me in looking at quality of life as I age. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Because as we talked about earlier, they're already having a conversation. So you might as well initiate it to conversate with them. So as we approach these conversations, get ready to have them, what questions should a person ask themselves internally and think about, reflect on prior to starting those conversations? What would each of you, I'll start with you, Kelly.
I would say, you know, really look at what your goals are now and what you think your goals will be later. A lot of conversations that my agency has with families is, okay, these are what your needs are today, all right, but what are the what ifs? What if your mobility becomes an issue? You know, what are the options for you here? What if? And you know, nobody plans to break a hip tomorrow. You know, like, oh, Wednesday I'm gonna break my hip and go to the hospital. You know, these things just, you know, pop up. A lot of times we don't get warning signs. So to have these conversations with yourself and think through it, and talking to your spouse and whoever that is, whoever you choose as a trusted person, and maybe that is all of your children, or maybe it's just one or two. I would encourage you though, if you do have that conversation with one child, or you decide that you want this, you know, one child to make your decisions on your behalf, make sure that the other children know and you choose why. Some children might say, thank you, Mom, I couldn't do that. I couldn't make those hard decisions. I don't want to be in that part, you know, in that role. But, you know, think through what you know about yourself medically, or maybe what you know about maybe family history. These are the things that I would want to happen. And the other thing that really ties into it big, and it's a bummer that it does tie in big, are finances. You know, nursing homes are incredibly expensive. Having 24-hour care at home is astronomically expensive. So you've got to kind of tie that into your factors of what your wishes and what your goals would be.
Anybody want to add anything to that? Caitlin, you seem like you might have something to
I
add.
will. I'll jump off of that. I think one of the most important questions is who's going to honor my choices. I am the controlling one. I'm one of 4. I'm the second in line. We have a wide age span. There's 18 years start to finish in our family. 2 boys, 2 girls. The oldest happens to be a boy. And I was the one chosen to be the power of attorney for Dad. In part because I grew up with the 2 brothers and neither of them scare me. And so when it comes time, I can do what Dad wants. So Dad and I have had that discussion. We have talked about what his wishes are. And one of my favorite stories to tell about my brothers is that we have a cardiac history in our family. Dad went in, we thought it was going to be a normal stenting. He ended up needing bypass. And so in the room with Dad, all of my siblings, I said, here's what Dad wants. And I made sure we had that conversation with him present because I knew he hadn't had that discussion yet. But my sister's an ICU nurse, I worked on the cardiac unit, we knew stuff could go wrong. And we wanted to make sure that there were not going to be any hurt feelings or any of us trying to take Dad out for the flannel shirts. We wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. And so we had that discussion in the room. And so we keep having that discussion, but Dad knows that I'm the one who will go toe-to-toe if necessary to make sure that his wishes are honored. And so we want to encourage you to choose that person who's going to honor what you want and not necessarily do what they think you would want.
All right, Kelly, anything to add to that?
Just a funny story. And I lost both of my parents about 4 years ago and lost them pretty closely. My mom refused to give any advance directives or anything to what she wanted, just refused. So it was me, my sister, and my father to decide what we needed to do with Mom. And Mom got very sick very fast, and I'd say within a matter of 2 weeks, could not communicate with us at all. And so that was tough. So what we did as a family, and I'm not saying this would work for everybody, but we had what was called a daily board meeting. At 7:30 in the morning, all 3 of us were on the phone and we talked, okay, today, this is what tests they want to do, this is what they want to do, and we all voted. And, that worked for us, but I know that won't work for a lot of families, but Dad was very open to talking about all the what ifs. So sometimes a family member will just refuse to have that conversation. But I'll tell you, it was a heck of a lot easier caring for Dad than caring for Mom. But I still have no regrets because our whole family was on the same page with our early morning board meeting each day. But, kind of think about what would work for you and what works for your communication and your family's communication style. There's not a book that says step 1, do this, step 2, do this. But take what information you have, take what learned experience you have. I'm sure you have friends or family where you have heard terrible stories. And then friends and family that you've heard wonderful stories about, where they've gotten through this terrible grieving thing. And the thing is when it comes to end of life decisions and stuff, everybody's gonna grieve and react differently. And how they think they're gonna act and how they actually will act in those times of crisis are not always the same thing. So.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you have anything to add? Anything that they should be asking themselves about or be open to ask about?
I was just wondering too, by show of hands, how many of you have made your advance directives or the Iowa physician's order for scope of treatment. Okay, so
About half.
Wonderful.
At least a little over half.
So a lot of this might be new to some, but you've heard this many times. So as Caitlin and Kelly were speaking, I was like, have the life circumstances changed for that person that you may have appointed? Have they moved away and are they not as active as what maybe they were when you had appointed them, whether it was a decade ago or more decades? So you can change that, and that medical power of attorney is important. That can be just with a notary, is that correct, Caitlin? So, you know, if that person's health has changed or life circumstances have put them in a spot where maybe you should elect someone else, that's okay to do. And then so that's the medical power of attorney that you can do just the notary, but the power of attorney for financial, you would have to get the lawyer involved to help change that if need be.
Most of the time, yes. You can occasionally do it at bank. So if you banked somewhere for a very long time, they usually have notaries and oftentimes are willing to help you out make that change in the financial power of attorney.
Okay, so just wanted to kind of add that too for the people that have already made those decisions, so thank you.
So even, you know, we always tell everybody when you do your will and your trust to revisit that every 10 years with your attorney or your planner. So the same thing would be through your medical directive. You know, you want to check that every 10 years and maybe once we reach a certain age, maybe every 2 to 3 years, we look at that because people's lives change. You know, people move away, they start families, they move across the nation. So just something to revisit. So now I'd like for each of you to give us one critical, if everyone here was just going to go home and have one conversation with their family, what conversation would you want them to have? And we're going to go one at a time. So I'm going to start again with Rebecca since she went last. Are you ready for that one?
Yes, thank you. So that one critical conversation to me would be, think about your health today. What is it that is most important to you for the quality of life? And is that what you currently have on paper and have communicated to your family? So just making sure that your advance directives are up to date. If you don't have one, you can ask your doctor to get that. They should all have that iPost in their office, or where else would you recommend getting that, Caitlin?
You can get it from your doctor's office. You can, it has to be signed by your physician, so really you should do it through your office. And then the ideal place to keep it is on your refrigerator. In the event that something happens, when EMS is called, they will always check your refrigerator, as that is where they are told they are to be hung.
Thank you.
We'll have you write it down and we'll have a Q&A at the very end here.
I would say the most critical conversation that you have is really just to start the conversation. If you know what you want, tell somebody, you know, whoever it is, tell somebody that you trust and somebody that you know. If you're in the hospital, they'll come, right? So just start it, and just start it.
Mine has a couple little pieces to it. So the first one is, when this happens, I'll be ready for a change. We all know that there's that point where you are going to be willing to accept help, need help, or change locations that you're currently at. So that critical conversation is, if I am having glaucoma and I can't read the newspaper anymore, then I want X, Y, and Z to happen, because that's going to affect my driving, my medications, and how I interact with the world. So having that critical conversation of, at what point would I be willing to kind of engage with what are the next steps? Because a lot of times we want to, as children, we want to help. We want to make sure that we are keeping you the healthiest. And so our opinion of what you may need is going to be different than your opinion of what you're willing to accept. And so kind of giving everybody that cue of, well, at this point, I might be ready for some assistance.
I like that. And I would write it down and sign it, because then you can revisit that and you can say, this is in my own, these are my terms. right? It's all about you remaining in control, making your own terms. So, is there any other conversations you can think of you'd add to those?
Just the one thing I want to say is that I think that power of attorney scares some people a lot, because there are real instances of power of attorneys being abused. But I want you to know that you have the legal right, as long as you are within sound mind, to revoke your power of attorney at any time. And you can change that. So keep that in mind. It's not a guardianship or conservatorship. Like, you can't change those. You have to go through the courts. And if all you do is power of attorney and durable power of attorney, and determine that person, okay, because you don't want to not do anything, because then worst case scenario, you end in the courts, and the court is deciding who's going to decide your situation for you through guardianship and conservatorship.
I'm just gonna add to that real quick, Carla. In the hospital, we do have a order of succession. And so in the state of Iowa, it goes to your spouse. If your spouse is not available, it goes to the eldest child or the majority of the adult children. And then it goes to your parents if they are still existing, and then your siblings. So there is an order that we go through, and you really don't want to get stuck with that person. You don't want making your choices. And I can tell you that I have so many times in the hospital had to say, yes, I understand you're the power of attorney, but my patient is still of sound mind and they're their own decision maker. Your children, your family, your loved ones, your best friend, your sister-in-law, they don't get to make the choices as long as you are still a sound-minded body. Even if they are your power of attorney. They can't access the information, they can't change the things, you're still in charge.
Good advice. So we actually gave you, did you have something? Okay, well, we'll have questions in just a second here. So we'll do Q&A at the very end, but we also gave you a copy of an example of those conversations for you to have in the back there. And so it's just kind of a meeting agenda for you. And then a couple of things I want to add is when you set that agenda, set a time to have those conversations, turn off the TV, turn off the radio, get a babysitter, no kids allowed, right? No kids. And make sure that closed loop communication is already built in. So make sure you have them repeat back what they hear you saying and hearing. So what I hear is you want this. That's important for them to repeat it back to you, so you can really understand that they know what your goals are. And also try to keep it logical. This is a tough one. Try to get the emotion out of it. Keep the emotion in as far as that you're coming from a loving place. But as far as hurt feelings, be open, because if someone says they don't want to be in charge of something, I know it can feel hurtful, but better to know now than them be in a position of making those choices for you when they're not the right person. Maybe they don't feel capable of that. So we're gonna open it up for some role playing. Does anybody feel brave about saying a conversation they would like role played, either by our lovely panelists or by themselves? If you want, I'll start with one, because I have some situations I've run into over the years. So I'm gonna give you one, and then if you decide you guys want some, and before we do role playing, let's go ahead and, so while your questions are fresh, actually, let's go ahead and start with questions. We're gonna bring a mic over to you real quick so that everybody can hear your question. That way when they're fresh in your mind.
Pretty loud too. Hi, I'm Donna, and hello.
There you go, now I can hear you, Donna.
My question was about the power of attorney for medical, and I already have that established, but as I was going through the guidebook, and there's all these examples and things of different situations and choices, I was just kind of overwhelmed with it, and my doctor just said, I will talk with your son, I will be there, and then you were giving an example of, well, what if I lose my vision? I mean, how specific do we have to be about different situations, as far as, you know, helping someone to make those decisions?
Okay, and we'll give you the best answer we can without
Yeah.
overstepping our legal, since we're not attorneys, but we will have an attorney next month.
I find this one really easy to give you advice on. So, what kind of life do you want to live? What is important to you? So that's going to be different for everybody in here. For one parent, it is to continue to be able to work outside, be in the garden. That is what brings them joy. For another one, it is spending time with grandkids and being at activities. So whatever your life looks like and what your goals are, whatever you need medically to support that is what's important to you. So if it's mobility, if it's finances, those are the important conversations to have. So if you're not able to lead the life which you desire, then what would you want? And so that, as long as you have that big, broad, encompassing conversation, those of us who have to help you with those choices can say, well, Mom can't drive anymore, and it's really important for her to be at the kids' activities. So can we still get her there safely through different forms of transportation, somebody picking her up? If we can do that, your life is going to be minimally impacted. While I understand it's severe to you because you are losing a great deal of independence, and I don't want to downplay that, we can still put things into place to keep you at your goal.
Good question. Thanks for that answer. Julie, I know you had a question here.
You use the terms power of attorney and durable power of attorney.
Can you hold it up to your mouth, Jill?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You use the terms power of attorney and durable power of attorney. What are the differences between those two?
Somebody else want to take that?
A durable power of attorney is a medical power of attorney. So that person to do that. A straight power of attorney is for finances. So there are sometimes you may, in a family, may want to give one person over your finances and then another person over your medical. But keep in mind, a lot of times, especially when those powers of attorney are in full action, so to speak, those two individuals need to work closely together, right? Because a lot of times, medical decisions like where you may live, if it's assisted living or a nursing home or in your home, the finances play into that, right? So those two people need to work better about it. But sometimes you might have one child that's wonderful at caregiving, but a terrible financial person, right? So you can factor those in. So you can have them be the same person or separate.
Thank you.
My question is that, before you were talking about controlling and all this stuff. If I'm in the hospital, I cannot make the decision, it falls to my husband. And then if my husband cannot make the decision, it falls to my oldest son. What if my oldest son is controlling and I don't really want him to make decisions for me? I want my second son to make decisions. Then what do you do?
Who wants to take that? Okay, you want that one?
It is appropriate to have that secondary person listed on the medical power of attorney, or durable power of attorney is the other word you'll hear oftentimes. And so after your husband's name as the appointed person, you could have that secondary as your second son. So you don't have to go by that list that Caitlin spoke about that's in place if there is no.
But he might want to, he say, I'm the oldest.
Oh, your son, that's a good conversation to have as a family and kind of state why you would want your second son. And yes, those are tough conversations to have, but it's better to have them beforehand.
And if you have that power of attorney, durable power of attorney in place, even though he may want to, whoever's name is on that is the decision maker.
Great
That
question.
would be your protection. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess I should you have one of each, the durable and the medical? And then what's the difference between advanced directive? How does that one fit in?
I think what we should do on this, I think we're going down a little bit of a legal path on some of these questions, and I want to save them from having to answer because we're not attorneys. So let's talk about the advanced part, and then next month we actually have an attorney that will be here, and they'll be able to answer a lot of our legal questions, I think, in more depth. So they've all faced these legal questions when it comes to their roles in the hospital, but we can't go too far down just for protection against their licensures and legal stuff. So let's talk about, what was the advanced directive part of that, Dave?
How does that compare to the will?
Oh, an advanced directive, how does it compare to, an advanced directive I know can be part of your will, so I can say that from personal, who just did my trust and my will this summer. I made an advanced directive and filed it with my will, but also, who wants to answer about advanced directives and the benefits of having that?
So your advanced directive, we have two different forms that are most commonly used. I'm sure there are more, and your lawyer can speak to that. But in the hospital, we have your advanced directives and we have an I-post. An I-post is a form that is on a lovely salmon color sheet of paper, and it is always salmon. And it tells your loved ones exactly what you want. From, do you want to be full resuscitation? Do you want comfort measures only? Or do you want no interventions? Those are your three choices. And so you tell your family what you would want. It then discusses if you would like artificial nutrition, and it says how we know you want that. And so if you are completing that on your own, then it's checked patient preference. If your family's completing it because of an event, then it'll say based on known choices, and then it is signed by your physician. So it is a legal medical order signed by your physician, so that's our I-post. And then your advanced directives are something that you have filled out with your lawyer